A very smart man once said, live operation is the fusion point of art and commerce. It's because, you have the game designers who want to make a beautiful game. Oh, it's so beautiful. And they put stuff on the backlog where you think, this is cool, but what do we try to solve here, right? So the live operations guy tend to be the guys that bring a bit of a commercial aspect into the game design. I think first and foremost, it's a service to the live game. Monitoring, steering KPIs towards set criteria that the game intrinsically fails to meet. So you will push it live and you will see, whatever, the ARPU is crap, day 1 retention is crap, day 3 retention is crap, and while you fix it along the way, you can use live operations to help you fix that. But what is it? So, as I said, so you can use live operations to steer KPIs, to raise ARPDAU, ARPPU, to artificially bridge gaps in your day 3, day 7 retention. You can use it to invigorate your game, meaning like doing reactivation campaigns. You try to retain people, of course, a major focus as well. And you can try to tackle any kind of specific problem you want to tackle on the development side and fix it with live ops as you go. Then again, live ops, you can use it as well for more monitoring. So what do players enjoy most? Where do they spend their time and their money in? Meaning, you want to know what your players do and enjoy, which game loops they use, which loops are underused, just to know where you could focus on and where to spend your feature development on in the future. Then content localization for English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, sometimes Turkey and Russia, for all player-related messages or live ops related messaging. So this means that you can use your live ops team to localize and culturalize your content as well if your team is big enough, right? You can also outsource this or always start with English if it works for you. But usually in Europe we try to cover all the major market languages. And last but not least, feature development. So live ops is basically running the show, and then they will also see a lot of things and will have some ideas on what to put on the backlog, and also how to reprioritize and give sanity checks to things that are on the backlog, on the sprint planning. Main focus. So I think it's 3 to 4 pillars here, and one of course is conversion. So increasing payer base, obviously, by identifying needs and making offers relevant. So you try to work with the players that are there and try to convert them into payers. And the best thing, it's best done by making any offer relevant. It's the same for any other business as well, offline and online. Monetization. Obviously, keeping customer players or customer player base engaged and potentially migrate them into higher spender buckets, meaning, you keep the people busy, you keep them engaged, and then also, try to up the ante a little bit, try to see where they spend money on and try to migrate them into higher buckets. Like the definitions are, like whales, killer whales, and you have it. So you can always try to, make them spend a little bit more and keep them spending, obviously, along as we go. Then another major focus, of course, is retaining players. As mentioned on so many panels here before, distribution or marketing has become very, very hard and very expensive. So you got to work with who's there, and you want to work with who's there. So live ops can do that for you in terms of giving players goals to achieve and content to strive for. So in fact, on a couple of our games, we don't really have much content going on, and live ops is actually generating most of the content, meaning they set up tournaments, they set up events, they set up competitions and arenas and so on and so forth. This is all done by live operations. Then of course winning them back once they're becoming active. And as mentioned before, you can gap drop-off points with live ops generated events. So like you see you have a massive day 3 retention problem. So you could go and message players and try to actively avoid the drop-off point by messaging or giving them any item that they would have needed if you identify the actual drop-off point. And then, yeah, last but not least, feature development. So live ops could have, if wanted, a big influence on your roadmap as well, because obviously if they run the game, they know player and payer behavior. And you could take the learned back to the devs and then also help sanity check and reprioritize items in the backlog or for the sprint planning. In practice, how could that look like? Conversion. So over the years, this has become very, very sophisticated, I have to say. In the beginning, we just tried some stuff. Yeah, let's put an item on discount and see what it does. Nowadays, I have to say, this becomes increasingly sophisticated and cultivated. So I've seen companies have a separate BI unit, right? But you could as well make that part of the live operations teams, give them database access and give them the chance to identify spender patterns. Like, you know, usually it's pretty much the same average on every game. Somebody will usually buy within the first 2-3 days, and they usually start converting at a certain price point and with a certain set of items, first and second purchase. And if you already know that, why not create a promotion and hit players that reach that time limit with that particular offer because you know it potentially works. So you identify spender patterns, monitor early game consumption. Yeah, you identify the price point where they convert with, and the first item and second purchase. Then, as usual, as for all of us, if we are hit with a promotion that is relevant for us, I don't know, you know, we all watch car ads on TV much more, with much more attention if we're actually thinking about buying a car. So if you make anything relevant, then you also have a bigger chance of actually converting a player. Monetization. So you will have some, you know, in most of the games that I work with, you have a certain content. And with content, I don't mean necessarily feature planning. I mean, you know, for Marvel, it's the heroes. When do the heroes come out, right? The next hero, when is the next hero in the gacha? Or for the strategy games, we have new troop types and so on and so forth, right? So you have to plan when you're planning on giving those items or those in-game items out, and how are you going to do it? And that will involve also the sales planning. So you try to make a 3-month plan, roughly, and then usually a month you do like a day-to-day planning of things, on what day you try to do what. That comes alongside offer and events. So in most of our games, we also have the chance to do, you know, tournaments, anything you can measure in games. Yeah, like, you know, troops, let me find an example. Troops killed or troops produced, you know, for any kind of metric in game that you have, you can try to set up events and tournaments. That said, obviously you need a good backend in order to do that as well. So, you know, some games are very limited by the backend. But luckily we have the chance to almost alter anything in game as a live ops team, and also be able to do tournaments on any kind of metric in game. And then we come to an interesting part, which is, yeah, you know, let's say part of the evil empire, and is a far end of things that you can do with live operations, what we call pivoting. So pivoting means if you have monthly, or you will have probably a rough idea where you want to be in terms of sales and revenue, and you will have quarterly targets broken down in monthly targets, and if you do it right, obviously you will do daily targets as well. And if you say you have a hunger streak, you know, you've done a sales planning and nothing you do works, and you know, sales are abysmal, or you had any kind of technical problems, then you try to pivot, meaning you do short notice promotions and events that the live ops team comes up with, like ad hoc to try to save the day, so to say. That's what we call pivoting. Retention. Yeah, as mentioned before, if you can, for example, Marvel basically doesn't really have much content. In fact, all the maps and event maps are all live ops generated. So meaning there's a guy designing, demanding art assets prior, of course, but also just setting up the maps and the way they look as part of the live ops team. So he can do that in the back end, in fact. So any kinds of events or tournaments can be done by live operations. Then, yeah, as mentioned before, bridge drop-off points. If you know, for example, that people tend to churn after 30 days or at a particular level in your game, you can then send them a message and maybe give them the particular item they would need to overcome that particular threshold. Then, yeah, win back lost players, which is a tough one, in fact, because the experience I had with push notifications is not so great. In fact, email works best if you have the chance to create any kind of ID in your games, right? We have Kabam IDs. There's a lot of companies that play with IDs, and you have to register, and then you can hit them with an email, with this usually the most successful thing you can do. And then last but not least, of course, win back lost payers as well. Here you can go pretty crazy with things, because once they're lost, you have not much to lose. You can try to figure out where they dropped out, particularly at what level or particular stage, and also in what cohort, and then hit them with give them free items, log back in, and receive X items which were relevant for him at that point where he actually lost. And you don't have much to lose, in fact, right? If they come back, good. The only thing that you can't do, which I recommend, is you cannot make this a particular automated pattern. Because once players figure out, oh, I'm not logging in for 14 days and get free stuff, then then it'll be fairly much fraudulent. So you need to kind of hide your tracks a bit. Yeah, and as I mentioned for Marvel, for example, live ops content, meaning any kind of activity that you can do. On some of our strategy games, we actually opened a PvP server for a weekend, right, with altered game metrics, like level up. There's no building time for the cities, and you would have like the whole game experience basically crammed into a weekend, and people really appreciated it and loved it. Feature development. So usually the BI guys, or in this case the live ops guys, will be able to monitor and document player behavior fairly well, and they know what they spend their time on. And you will have loops in your game which took a long time, and features in game which took a long time to develop, but actually nobody's spending time on it. So you can either decide, is there still potential or not? Do we want to use live ops to reinvigorate underused loops? And this could be a recommendation coming from live ops. Also, you can say, no, scrap that. We're just going to totally negate that part of the game and just focus on the stuff that players spend time on anyway already. Then obviously, it would be great to have a say in the sprint planning and help prioritize with the backlog. So, as mentioned before, there's always this clash between the product owner and the game designers who want to make a beautiful game, and usually who ultimately also are the product owners and have the last say. But it would be cool if you get that done, that the live ops manager, and that is the essence of what I'm telling you today, is if the live ops manager would be part of the development team, but more later. Team setup. That's a pretty clever free kick here. So this is a setup how it could look like. So you would have a live ops manager, and then whatever you call them. In the early days of live operations, we called them game masters. But you can call them whatever you like. Live ops associates, live ops specialists, and we try to have one for each of the major languages. What do they do? The live ops manager does team management, sales planning, coordination, obviously also tasking it out. there's nothing more boring than doing the same thing over and over again. So obviously you can rotate tasks. You know, one guy takes care of conversion and retention for a certain time frame and then cycle around. But all of them also serve the needs of culturalization or localization of their region. Then the LiveOps manager will also keep a LiveOps backlog with all the ideas they have for the live game. Not only features, but also for the back end, for things that they spend too much time on, right? Sometimes we take hours to set up a tournament and then you try to save it in the back end and it fails, right? So sometimes you also have ideas and feedback to the back end that also need to be prioritized. What kind of people are you looking for? So this is like what we call in German an egg-laying wool milk pig, right? Somebody that does a bit of everything. So SQL, Excel skills would be amazing. Oh, there's a part cut off. Then basic level of data interpretation. Then there needs to be some sort of community management involved. I frankly don't believe, and I hope I'm not going to get scrutinized for that, that usually on a mobile game it's not justified to have community manager in a full-time position. So I would believe this is part of LiveOps and can be part of a live operations specialist role. Then of course event sales and execution. So they will be the ones actually executing the sales planning set up as a team, but coordinated from the LiveOps manager. And ideally you also do a post-mortem. I mean, not for everything you do, but if you try anything new, anything crazy, it would be cool to document it and learn from it, meaning you do a so-called post-mortem of the events you do. You document what you were planning, then how successful it was, how many people were participating or purchasing, and so on and so forth. And then, last but not least, all the reactivation and conversion efforts, I think. That's the word that's missing here. Obviously, you can do that, you can task that out, as I said, to particular people. Somebody takes care of reactivation and conversion. This can be done manually by queries, obviously. And then you just figure out, what people are at what stage of the game. You query the user numbers, user IDs, and then hit them with a particular offer. Also, the same goes for the reactivation. People that you consider inactive, inactive players. Again, don't make it a automated pattern because people tend to abuse that. But this could be a task for the LiveOps team. Yeah, so, and that's my pledge, because I think it's, to some extent, free-to-play is also oft scrutinized as pay-to-win, but at the end of the day, everybody wants to eat, and the game industry wants to pay salaries, and somebody has to rake in the money. So I'm not saying what you have to do in-game and how to monetize, but I believe that live operations is definitely an opportunity for you. And to make this work and not just be somebody nagging and always making suggestions, it should be part of the game development team and have a say. Otherwise, it's I think a lost opportunity. Practical examples. So this is some stuff, just to give an example of what where LiveOps had influence on what we did and what we also developed. So on most of our strategy games, and actually I think this is still the case today on newer titles. The core loop was you build up your city, you raise up your buildings in order to produce troops. And the better the troop type is, the more trophies or might or glory, whatever you call it, will be accounted to the player. And one of our essential problems was that in most of our strategy games, this was the main indicator for ranking. So people were trying to get as much might or trophies in order to be ranked up high. So what they did is, in the end, they produced troops, but they didn't use them because they wanted to keep the might. And they were hoarding them, and we had no way to reinvigorate them and using them for anything else. So what we then did, we said, let's make dummy items, distribute them to everybody, and ultimately make this like a new kind of trophy thing and make it stealable. So that you actually, through active pursuit and PvP, you could steal that and also create a new leaderboard for this kind of trophies. And that worked very well. And this was basically done through feedback from live operations. Token item exchange logic. So, yeah, apologies, the font is a bit weird here. As live operations, to be successful with the promotions you do, you're basically forced every day to reinvent yourself and to hit the particular taste of people around that particular day. So to guess people's taste is basically your job. And in order to make that a bit easier, we created the round tower or sage tower in some of the games. And all that is like a marketplace where you can exchange certain tokens for items that you want. So in a sense is you make those tokens available, or you sell them, or you make them drops anywhere, and you can decide what items can be exchanged for it. You know, might it be gear, or you know, in whatever kind of games, particular heroes, particular generals, you make them available for that particular token. And people will value this token because it can be exchanged. It's a potential value for any kind of chase item in your game. So this is an initiative we also started from LiveOps. Yeah, reactivation targeting. So I'm going to share with you a bit about reactivation success. So usually, as I said, if a payer is lost, there's not much to lose, right? And you can try to hit them with a very nice offer, or even free stuff. Everybody loves free stuff, why not? And we figured out that we tried it with hard currency, right? So we just gave them a bunch of hard currency, but then we tried as well giving them items, as I mentioned before, that were relevant at the particular time of dropout, and that worked much, much better. So I would recommend going with items, but you know, ultimately it's a matter of A/B testing, which I believe is also an essential part of live operations. Playing around with that a bit. Summing it up, do live operations. It's good. I think it's a lost chance if you don't. To what extent? Remains on you to be determined, or on your superiors. But I think you have a lost chance if you don't really do any kind of live operations. Cover your main market locales. So, as I said before, so what we try to do in most of the companies I worked for, since we're in Europe, we covered most of the EFIX languages, sometimes Turkey and Russia as well. So you will have a live ops person for each country, where localization of content, might it be any kind of player messaging or emails and so on, is part of their day-to-day job. Yeah, fully integrate your live ops manager into your dev team, and not just make him some nagging sideshow, right? Where you listen to what they have to say, but not really have a say in anything, because I think it's valuable feedback. And yeah, plan your content rollout with LiveOps together, meaning that you should have close ties with the dev team and know what's coming up, and ultimately plan the content distribution together with LiveOps. And yeah, as mentioned before, focus on conversion, monetization, retention, and ultimately feature development. And remember, LiveOps is a service to the live game. So, you know, I'm not saying the LiveOps guy should be the product owner. I'm just saying it's a service. And it can get your game ultimately to the goals, or closer to the goals where it's intrinsically not really going for in the first place. Meaning you would be surprised sometimes with the initial metrics in beta, and you see immediately that you have a problem, and LiveOps really can help you work around. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? No? Good. Well, then, thank you very much.